I stood in the middle of the Horizon Towers construction site, watching Portland glow under the night lights, knowing my 30-year career was about to be erased. The roar of machinery filled the air, the smell of cement dust and steel clinging to me, but all I felt was a heavy weight in my chest. 3 decades of dedication. From my first days holding blueprints to becoming the field operations manager, the guy every worker at Ironcrest Builders called the Blueprint Man. I'd built skyscrapers in Pioneer Square, luxury condos in the Pearl District, all to code, not a single flaw. But now, standing on this site, I could feel the shadow of betrayal creeping closer. Vincent Cole, the head of Ironcrest, had changed. The company I once took pride in was now chasing profits, no matter the cost. And I, the guy who put safety first, was becoming a roadblock in their eyes. My name's Drake Larson, 61 years old, and I've spent my life making sure Portland's buildings don't just stand but are safe for the people inside them. 30 years ago, I started as a young engineer, working under Ironcrest's founder, a man who believed construction was about people, not just money. I learned to read blueprints like a story, to check every steel beam, every concrete pour, so no mistake slipped through. They called me the Blueprint Man because no one knew building codes better than I did, from Multnomah County regulations to national standards. I remember Portland back then, before it had the sleek high-rises it boasts today. I helped build those, every brick, every joint, carrying my mark. But things changed when Vincent Cole took over Ironcrest 15 years ago. He was ambitious, hell-bent on competing with national giants, and willing to do whatever it took. I saw the first signs when he pushed to speed up projects, pouring foundations before permits were approved. "Drake, we need to be flexible," Vincent said in a meeting, his voice smooth but his eyes cold. I pushed back, not out of stubbornness, but because I knew water and gravity don't forgive mistakes. A building constructed wrong could collapse, not today, but 10 years from now, when someone's living in it. I'd seen accidents at other firms, and I didn't want Ironcrest going down that road. Ellen, my wife, always got that. She passed 5 years ago, but her voice still rings in my head whenever I face a tough call. "Drake, you never give up when it matters," she'd say, her eyes shining with belief. I remember one evening at our home in Lake Oswego, when I told her about Vincent's pressures. Ellen took my hand, said my work wasn't just steel and concrete, it was where people built their lives. She gave me the strength to start keeping records, not for revenge, but to protect what I believed in. In my small office at Ironcrest, at 811 SW 6th Ave, I kept a blue folder where I logged every violation, substandard materials, unapproved plan changes, times we built beyond permits. I didn't want to use it, but I knew someday it'd be my only shield. My office was a cramped corner, walls covered in site maps, old papers stacked on shelves, and a framed photo of Ellen on my desk. Every day I looked at her picture, feeling like she was still there, urging me to stay true. But Ironcrest wasn't the place I once knew. Vincent pushed bolder projects, like Horizon Towers, a mixed-use complex of retail and luxury apartments in downtown Portland. I oversaw it, but I saw red flags, materials not matching specs, plans altered without review. I reported them, but Vincent just laughed, told me not to be so rigid. I wrote it all down in the blue folder. Every entry a warning no one heeded. One March morning, in 2025, I walked into where sunlight streamed through glass windows, onto a polished wooden table. Vincent stood there, next to a younger guy, about 35, in an expensive suit, his eyes sharp and cold. "Drake, this is Tyler Brooks, our new COO, Vincent said, his voice brimming with pride. "He's going to take Ironcrest to the next level." Tyler looked at me, no smile, just a curt nod, like I was an insignificant detail. I shook his hand, but a chill ran down my spine. I knew in that moment that my role, my 30 years of sweat and loyalty, was in danger. I went back to my office, sat down, my hand brushing Ellen's photo. The blue folder sat in the bottom drawer, heavy as a promise. I didn't want to believe Ironcrest, the place I'd given my life to, would turn on me. But Tyler's look, the way Vincent avoided my eyes, said it all. I opened the drawer, stared at the folder, and told myself, if they want to erase me, I won't let them erase what I've built. I closed the drawer, stood up, and walked out of the office, bracing for the worst. Portland still glowed outside, but inside me, a fire was kindling, not to destroy, but to protect what's right. Tyler Brooks looked at me like I was an outdated piece of equipment, saying I had no place at Ironcrest after 30 years. His eyes were sharp and cold, devoid of respect, as he stood in the gleaming boardroom of Ironcrest Builders in Pioneer Square, Portland. The long glass table reflected light from the windows, where the city skyline showcased buildings I'd helped raise. I stood there, 61 years old, with 3 decades of dedication, but to Tyler, I was just a loose end to be cut. He was 35, newly appointed as COO, dressed in an expensive suit, talking about restructuring and modern efficiency, as if my years sweating on construction sites meant nothing. I felt injustice rising in my chest, but I stayed silent, my gaze sweeping the room that had once been my battleground, where I'd fought to keep everything up to code. I went back to my small office, where the walls were covered with site maps and old paperwork. On my desk, Ellen's framed photo looked at me, her eyes seeming to say something. I sat down, touching the frame, thinking of the days we had together in Lake Oswego. Ellen always knew how to steady me. "Drake, you never give up when it matters," she'd said, and now those words echoed inside me. I'd spent my life making sure Ironcrest's buildings were safe, from Horizon Towers to high-rises in the Pearl District. But Tyler Brooks, with his MBA, and not a single day holding a shovel, wanted to erase my legacy with a few words in a meeting. That meeting happened on a Tuesday morning, in the boardroom with windows overlooking Portland. Tyler stood at the head of the table, swiping his tablet, his voice flat like he was reading a script. "We need someone with fresh ideas for this division," he said, not looking at me. "Someone who gets modern efficiency." The word efficiency hit like a knife. I wanted to remind him that my efficiency had kept projects standing through storms and supply chain crises. But I just nodded, said, "I understand." Tyler seemed caught off guard, maybe hoping I'd push back, giving him an excuse to shove me out faster. I didn't give him that. The meeting ended with nothing decided, but I knew the score. Ironcrest didn't need me anymore. I returned to my office, opened the bottom drawer, where the blue folder sat quietly. 8 years of notes, every entry in my neat handwriting, substandard materials, unapproved plan changes, times Vincent Cole ordered construction to start before permits cleared. I didn't do those things, but I saw them, objected, and when no one listened, I wrote them down. I closed the drawer, not taking the folder out, still hoping Ironcrest might do the right thing. But deep down, I knew that was unlikely. That afternoon, I sent an email to Vincent Cole, warning him about the violations I'd documented in the blue folder. I kept it short, professional, hoping he'd reconsider. But hours later, Vincent's reply came, his tone ice cold. "Drake, you're valuable, but times have changed. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." He called me outdated, as if my 30 years were a burden. The threat was clear: stay quiet, or I'd lose everything, even the severance. I sat in my office, looking at Ellen's photo, feeling like she was asking what I'd do next. 3 days later, Tyler called me back to the boardroom. This time, Emily Ward, a young HR rep, sat beside him, holding a stack of papers. Emily had a nervous habit of tucking her hair behind her ear, and I saw her do it repeatedly. Tyler didn't mince words. "Drake, we're restructuring field operations," he said, his voice flat. "Your position is being eliminated. The board wants you to have a respectful transition, 6 months severance, extended health benefits, and consulting opportunities if needed." His words were a death sentence. 6 months severance sounded generous, but I knew it was just a polite way to kick me out. "When does this start?" I asked, my voice steady, despite my pounding heart. "Today," Tyler replied, glancing at his watch. "This is your last day in the office. Emily will help you pack. 30 years, gone in 15 minutes. I didn't argue, didn't remind them. I knew every inspector in Portland by name, that I'd saved dozens of projects by calling in favors with city planners. I signed the papers, shook Tyler's hand, and followed Emily to my office. As I packed my coffee mug and Ellen's photo, I saw Vincent watching from the hallway, giving me a single nod, before vanishing into the elevator. No apology, just a cold acknowledgement. Emily walked beside me, silent, but her eyes were full of guilt, like she wanted to say something but couldn't. I didn't blame her. She was just doing her job. I grabbed the blue folder from the drawer, slipped it into my bag, and left Ironcrest. In the parking lot, I sat in my truck, keys in the ignition, but the engine off. Through the windshield, I saw Portland, the buildings I'd built standing tall against the gray sky. I'd missed my son's basketball games, worked weekends when Ellen was sick, buried myself in the job, after she passed. For what? A handshake and a cold goodbye. I pulled Ellen's photo from my bag, touched the frame. "What should I do, Ellen?" I whispered. Her voice came back. "You never give up when it matters." I started the truck, but didn't head home to Lake Oswego. Instead, I drove to the city's building safety office in downtown Portland. Susan Harper, the department head, was a junior inspector when I met her 25 years ago. Now she called the shots, and I knew she'd listen. As I parked outside the building, the blue folder felt heavy in my bag. This wasn't about revenge, I told myself. This was about doing what's right, like I always had. But deep inside, I knew a fire had sparked, and it wouldn't go out until Ironcrest paid the price. The blue folder in my hands felt heavy with 8 years of violations, and I knew it was time to act. I sat in my truck, parked outside my house in Lake Oswego, Portland, the dim streetlights filtering through the windshield. 8 years of meticulous notes, every line a testament to cut corners, ignored permits, and Ironcrest builders' decisions I'd fought against, but no one heeded. I didn't want to be the guy who tore things down, but after Tyler Brooks forced me into retirement, after Vincent Cole's threatening email, I had no choice left. 30 years of dedication, from my early days in Pioneer Square to the Horizon Towers project, couldn't end in silence. I gripped the bag holding the folder, feeling like it was whispering, "Do what's right, Drake." I drove to the Old Gold, a dive bar on Killingsworth Street, where yellow light and the stale smell of beer mingled. Pat Malone was waiting for me, sitting in a corner with a glass of whiskey. Pat, my friend from 20 years back, was a former building inspector who quit after Ironcrest pressured him to overlook a faulty project. "Drake, I knew you'd call," Pat said, his voice low but steady. I told him about getting fired, about the blue folder, and he nodded, his eyes flashing with familiar anger. "I kept some things," Pat said, sliding a thick envelope across the table. Inside were his old notes. Inspection reports Ironcrest forced him to bury, invoices for materials that didn't match specs. "Vincent Cole thinks he can buy the whole city," Pat said, "but not everyone sells their honor cheap." I took the envelope, feeling like I'd just found a true ally. A few days later, I sat in a corner of Stumptown Coffee on 3rd Avenue, the air thick with the scent of roasted beans and soft jazz. Susan Harper walked in, her silver hair tied back, her sharp eyes those of someone nearing retirement but still uncompromising. I'd known Susan since she was a junior inspector, and she trusted me because I'd never lied about a project. "Drake, what brings you here?" she asked, sitting down. I slid the blue folder across the table, along with Pat's documents. "Ironcrest is building wrong, Susan," I said. "Substandard materials, unpermitted work, unapproved plan changes. Horizon Towers is a prime example." I told her about foundations poured before permits, steel below grade, how Vincent Cole pushed my team to work without caring about safety. Susan flipped through the pages, her face growing graver. "This is worse than I thought," she said, her voice low. "Vincent's been calling city council, pressuring us to ignore reports. I suspect he's bribed a few people." Susan's words hit like a punch. I knew Ironcrest played dirty, but bribing city officials was another level. "He thinks money buys everything," I said, my hand tightening around my coffee mug. Susan nodded. "But not me, Drake. Not when I'm retiring soon and have nothing to lose." She promised to review the folder and start an investigation, but needed more evidence to take down Ironcrest's entire system of violations. I agreed to help, even though I knew it could cost me my severance, maybe even land me in a legal fight with Vincent's lawyer. Driving back to Lake Oswego, my phone buzzed. Carlos Rivera, the site foreman at Horizon Towers, texted, "Need to meet coffee shop near the site, 8 p.m. I'd known Carlos for 15 years, a hard worker who always looked out for his crew. When I got to the cafe, Carlos was in a corner, his face tense. "Tyler Brooks is making me hide violations at Horizon Towers," he said, his voice shaky. "They changed setbacks, used cheaper steel, told me not to report it. But I've got a family, Drake. I don't want anyone hurt if a building collapses." Carlos handed me a USB drive with internal emails from Tyler, ordering safety checks to be skipped. "I kept everything," he said, "but I need your help." I nodded, promising to protect him, though I knew this would make Ironcrest furious. That night, at home, I reviewed the blue folder, adding Pat's and Carlos's evidence. Each page was a piece of greed. Vincent Cole and Tyler Brooks weren't just cutting corners to save money. They'd built a system to dodge the law. I thought of Ellen, her words, "You never give up when it matters." When it matters, her photo on my desk seemed to watch me, urging me on. I called Susan, told her I had more evidence from Carlos, and she asked me to bring it first thing in the morning. "We're going big, Drake," she said. "Not just Horizon Towers, but every Ironcrest project." As I hung up, a text from Vincent Cole came through. "Drake, don't do something you'll regret. Your severance can still be canceled." The threat made my blood boil, but it also steeled my resolve. I wasn't doing this for money. I was doing it for workers like Carlos, for the people who'd live in Ironcrest's buildings, for what Ellen believed in. The next morning, I met Susan at the building safety office, handing her Carlos's USB and Pat's documents. She flipped through them, her eyes lighting up. "This is what I needed," she said. "I'm putting together an inspection team, starting with Horizon Tower. Then every other site." I left the office, a mix of relief and anxiety washing over me. Susan had set the plan in motion, but I knew Ironcrest wouldn't sit still. I called Carlos, told him to make sure everything at Horizon Towers matched the approved plans. "Inspections are coming, Carlos," I said. "Don't let your crew take the fall." He nodded over the phone, his voice firm. As I drove back to Lake Oswego, Portland stretched out before me, the buildings I'd built still standing, reminding me I hadn't lost yet. The blue folder was out of my hands, but the fire in my chest still burned, ready to face whatever Ironcrest threw my way. I stood outside the Horizon Towers construction site, watching Susan Harper lead her inspection team to tear apart Tyler Brooks's plans. The machinery had gone silent, replaced by the sound of footsteps and the sharp voices of inspectors cutting through Portland's dusty air. This site, where I'd spent months overseeing every weld and concrete pour, was now a battlefield for truth. After 30 years of dedication to Ironcrest builders, I'd been forced into retirement by Tyler, a 35-year-old COO with a contemptuous smirk, and threatened with losing my severance in Vincent Cole's icy email. But the blue folder, 8 years of meticulous notes on their violations, was out of my hands, and now it was shaking Ironcrest to its core. I wasn't here to gloat or boast. I was here to ensure the buildings I'd helped construct, from Pioneer Square offices to Pearl District condos, wouldn't collapse, wouldn't harm anyone. That morning I parked my truck a few blocks away, peering through a dust-streaked windshield. Susan Harper, her silver hair tied back, marched into Horizon Towers with 3 other inspectors and a city attorney, all wearing grim expressions. I knew they'd find what I'd documented: cheap steel below grade, setbacks illegally narrowed for more retail space, foundations poured before permits. Tyler stood by the site trailer, face pale, clutching his phone, making frantic calls, likely to Vincent. I pictured him scrambling to explain, to save his reputation, but Susan wasn't one to be swayed. Workers clustered in groups, whispering, unsure what was happening. A few glanced my way, as if sensing my role, but I stayed put, hands gripping the steering wheel, waiting for justice to unfold. I thought back to my early days at Ironcrest, young and full of fire, working under the company's founder, who believed every project was a promise to the community. I'd learned to check every steel beam, every blueprint, to catch any flaw. The nickname the Blueprint Man wasn't just praise, it was a responsibility I carried for 30 years. But when Vincent Cole took over, he turned Ironcrest into a profit-driven machine, safety be damned. I remembered nights in Lake Oswego, Ellen sitting beside me, listening to me vent about Vincent's pressure. "Drake, you do it for what's right," she'd say, squeezing my hand, her eyes bright with belief. Now, outside the site, I felt like Ellen was here, reminding me I'd chosen the right path, even if it cost me 3 decades of loyalty. A few hours later, Susan called. "Drake, you were right," she said over the phone, her voice firm but tinged with fatigue. "Horizon Towers is a disaster. Wrong setbacks, substandard materials, faked record. We're expanding inspections to 12 other Ironcrest projects." I sat in my Lake Oswego living room, staring at Ellen's framed photo on the table, feeling like she was nodding in approval. Susan said they'd found non-compliant steel in 3 other projects, and one building even used weaker concrete that could crack in years. "But there's more," she said, her voice lowering. "We have proof Vincent Cole bribed 2 city council members to ignore inspection reports. Your documents, Carlos Rivera's, and Pat Malone's were the key." Her words confirmed my worst fears. Ironcrest wasn't just cutting corners to save money. They'd built a web of corruption, buying off the system to skirt the law. I thought of Carlos Rivera, the Horizon Towers foreman, who'd risked everything to give me Tyler's internal emails. I called him right away, my tone urgent. "Carlos, Susan's digging deep," I said. "Make sure everything on site matches the approved plans. Don't let your crew take the fall." Carlos let out a relieved breath over the phone. "Thanks, Drake. I knew I picked the right guy, but I didn't feel like a hero. I was just doing what I'd always done, protecting the project, the people who relied on it, even if Ironcrest no longer wanted me." I thought of workers like Carlos, toiling under Portland's scorching sun, trusting the buildings they constructed would be safe. I couldn't let them, or future residents, pay for Vincent and Tyler's greed. That night, as I reviewed notes at home, my phone buzzed with an unexpected text from Emily Ward, the HR rep, who'd escorted me out of Ironcrest. "Drake, I'm sorry about that day," she wrote. "I didn't agree with how they treated you." Attached was a PDF, an internal memo from Tyler Brooks, directing the removal of all employees over 50 to modernize the company. "I thought you should have this," she added. I read the memo, my blood boiling. This wasn't just about firing me. It was a systematic plan to erase people like me, people who knew the value of a properly built structure. The document outlined goals: cut labor costs, replace outdated staff with younger, more compliant ones. I forwarded it to Susan immediately, and she replied instantly. "This changes everything, Drake. It's proof of age discrimination, on top of the construction violations." I thought of my days at Ironcrest, standing on sites, feeling Portland's pulse through every hammer strike. I'd missed my son's basketball games, worked weekends when Ellen was sick, buried myself in the job after she passed. For what? A cold handshake and a goodbye from Tyler. But Emily's quiet act gave me faith that not everyone at Ironcrest was blind to Vincent's greed. I sat in my living room, looking at Ellen's photo, feeling like she was saying, "Keep going, Drake, for what's right." I knew I wasn't alone, not with people like Emily, Carlos and Pat standing with me. The next week, I was called to the Multnomah County City Council chamber. The room was packed, reporters with cameras, Ironcrest workers in reflective jackets, lawyers in black suits, and Tyler and Vincent in the front row, their faces tense. I took a seat in the back, not wanting attention, just wanting to witness justice. Susan stepped to the podium, her voice clear and unwavering. She presented evidence from the blue folder: Pat Malone's documents, Carlos's emails, and now Emily's memo. The big screen flashed slides, photos of projects with shoddy steel, unapproved plan changes, fake invoices to hide cheap materials. "This isn't an isolated mistake," Susan said, her voice carrying across the room. "This is an 8-year system of violations, led by Ironcrest's leadership." She paused, staring at Vincent. "And we have proof of bribes to city officials, to bypass inspections, including emails and recordings from reliable sources." The room erupted in murmur, a wave rippling through the crowd. Vincent turned, his eyes searching for me, in the back row. It wasn't anger but defeat, as if he knew he'd lost. Tyler sat frozen, his face ashen, likely realizing he'd signed off on too many damning documents. I saw their lawyers whispering, scrambling for a defense, but I knew there was no way out. The city attorney stood, his voice stern. "Based on these findings, we're issuing an emergency stop work order for all Ironcrest projects. Every building from the past 10 years will be re-inspected, with costs borne by the company." The murmurs turned into a roar, like a small storm. This wasn't just a hit, it was a knockout that could ruin Iron. The attorney continued, his tone hard. "We're also referring the case to the district attorney for a criminal investigation into falsified records and bribery." I saw Tyler bow his head, hands gripping his chair, as if his world was crumbling. I didn't stay until the end. I didn't need to hear Vincent spin excuses to the press, or watch Tyler scramble to call his lawyer. I walked out of the chamber, Portland's cool air hitting my face. Driving back to Lake Oswego, I thought of Ellen, of the nights she sat with me, listening to me talk about work. "You do it for what's right, Drake," she'd said, her eyes shining. Now I knew I hadn't let her down. But the fight wasn't over. Ironcrest had money, lawyers, and they'd push back. I had to be ready, not just for me, but for Carlos, for Susan, for everyone who'd trusted me. A few days later, as I sorted papers at home, my phone buzzed. It was Michael Grant, owner of Solid Ground Construction, a rival firm in the Pearl District. "Drake, I heard what you did to Ironcrest," he said, his voice deep but genuine. "I need someone like you, someone who does it right." He offered me the role of Director of Compliance and Quality Control, a position where I could halt any project that didn't meet standards. I didn't answer right away, needing time to think, but inside, I knew this was a chance to keep doing what I'd started. I looked at Ellen's photo on the table, feeling like she was smiling, saying, "Keep going, Drake." Justice wasn't just about tearing Ironcrest down, it was about building something better, something right, and I was ready to do that. I stood on the new Solid Ground construction site, knowing that justice wasn't just about revenge, it was about doing what's right. Under Portland's early morning sun in 2026, the Pearl District hummed with the roar of excavators and hammers. the air thick with the smell of fresh steel and cement. I watched the steel framework rise. Every weld inspected, every concrete pour up to code, no corners cut. After 30 years at Ironcrest Builders, where I was forced into retirement by Tyler Brooks, a 35-year-old COO with a dismissive sneer, and threatened with losing my severance in Vincent Cole's cold email, I'd found a new place to carry on my mission. Solid Ground Construction wasn't just a company, it was proof that what I believed in, safety, honesty, quality, still mattered. I was no longer the forgotten blueprint man from Ironcrest. I was Drake Larson, 62, Director of Compliance and Quality Control, rebuilding not just buildings but myself. The journey here was rough. When I walked out of the Multnomah County City Council chamber, watching Ironcrest collapse under the weight of my blue folder, I didn't feel triumph. I felt relief, but also a hollow ache, like part of me had been erased, along with the company I once called home. 30 years of dedication, days under the scorching sun in Pioneer Square, nights poring over blueprints to catch every flaw, ended in 15 minutes by Tyler and Vincent. But the blue folder, 8 years of meticulous notes on shoddy steel, faked plans, and improper foundations, did what I never expected. It didn't just halt Horizon Towers, it triggered inspections of every Ironcrest project from the past decade. The press called it Portland's biggest construction scandal. Prosecutors charged Vincent and Tyler with falsifying records and bribing officials, and Ironcrest went bankrupt, its assets sold to cover inspection costs. I wasn't happy they failed. I was satisfied that justice prevailed, that people like Carlos Rivera, Pat Malone and Emily Ward stood with me. When Michael Grant, Solid Ground's owner, called to offer me a job, I sat in my Lake Oswego living room, staring at Ellen's framed photo on the table, wondering if I had the strength to move forward. Ellen, with her gentle smile, once said, "Drake, you never give up when it matters." When it matters, I remembered nights when she sat beside me, listening to me vent about Vincent's pressure, about violations I couldn't stop. "You do it for the people who live in those buildings," she said, squeezing my hand, her eyes bright with conviction. It was Ellen who gave me the strength to start the blue folder. Not for revenge, but to protect what was right. I looked at her photo, feeling like she was here, urging me on. I called Michael back, accepted the offer, and stepped into Solid Ground with a new purpose, as if I was carrying on a promise to Ellen, to Portland, to myself. My office at Solid Ground in the Pearl District was small but tidy, with a window overlooking the bustling site. Gone were the walls covered in site maps from Ironcrest, but I kept Ellen's photo on my desk, a beacon guiding me. As Director of Compliance, I had the power to stop any project that didn't meet standards, and I didn't hesitate to use it. On my first day, I walked the site, checking every steel beam, every blueprint, asking workers about processes. "We're doing it right, aren't we, Drake?" Sam, a young worker with a goofy grin, asked. I smiled, nodded. "Do it right, or don't do it." Sam nodded back, his eyes shining with the respect I'd lost at Ironcrest. I didn't just inspect, I taught them, from reading building codes to spotting subpar materials. I wanted this site, and every one after, to prove what I believed. A building isn't just steel and concrete, it's where people build their lives. Every day, I stood on the Solid Ground site, watching the new building rise, floor by floor, to code, without a single flaw. I thought of Carlos Rivera, the Horizon Towers foreman, who risked everything to give me Tyler's internal emails. I called him a few weeks after the hearing, and he said he'd left Ironcrest, landing a job at a smaller firm outside Portland. "Thanks, Drake," he said, his voice warm. "Without you, I don't know where I'd be." I thought of Pat Malone, my old friend who gave me his old inspection reports, and Emily Ward, the HR rep, who dared to send me Tyler's age discrimination memo. They didn't just help me, they helped Portland, ensuring safer buildings through our collective courage. One afternoon, I got an email from Susan Harper, now retired but still following the Ironcrest case. "Drake, you should know," she wrote. "Prosecutors formally charged Vincent Cole and Tyler Brooks. Ironcrest is bankrupt, its assets sold to cover inspection costs. You changed this industry." I sat in my Solid Ground office, reading the email, feeling like an old chapter had closed. Vincent, rumor had it, left Portland for a small town to dodge the press. Tyler, I heard, was working for a tiny firm in California, his COO swagger gone. I didn't take joy in their downfall. I was content that justice won, that faulty projects were stopped, that people like me, people who believe in doing right, still had a voice. I stepped onto the site, standing amid the noise of machinery, gazing at Solid Ground's new building. It wasn't just steel and concrete, it was my legacy, Ellen's, and everything I'd fought for. I thought back to my early days at Ironcrest, young and full of fire, believing every project was a promise to the city. I'd kept that promise, despite the cost of 30 years of betrayal. I ran into Sam on the site, and he asked, "Drake, how do you know you're doing it right?" I grinned, pointing to the blueprints. "Check twice, build once, and never let anyone push you to do wrong." Sam nodded, his eyes bright, and I knew I was passing on more than a skill, a belief in honesty, in doing right, no matter the cost. Back home in Lake Oswego, I sat in my living room, the golden lamplight falling on Ellen's photo. I touched the frame, whispering, "Thank you, Ellen, for keeping me on the right path." She wasn't here, but I felt her smile, her pride in what I'd done. Portland glowed outside, with the buildings I'd raised, and now the new ones, safe and solid, thanks to solid ground. I'd found liberation, not through revenge, but by continuing to do what's right. I thought of workers like Sam, who'd carry this work forward. And I knew I'd left a legacy, not just in steel and cement, but in the belief that justice is worth fighting for. The future stretched wide open, and I was ready to move forward. Day by day, project by project, the way I'd always built, steady, honest, and for the people who'd live in my buildings. I had no regrets about standing up to Ironcrest, handing the blue folder to Susan Harper, or believing in what Ellen taught me. My fight was over, but my story, and that of Carlos, Pat, and Emily, would inspire anyone who believes in doing right. Thank you for following my journey. From the day I was forced out to the moment justice prevailed, this is a story about never giving up. If it inspired you, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss more stories of justice and truth. Let's keep spreading the belief that doing right is always worth it, and I hope this story motivates you as much as it did me.